Recently, British Vogue published Shantae Joseph's article, "Is Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing Now?" And it started a very interesting conversation that's been going on for the past weeks. And like most things that we talk about here on my channel, it revealed something a lot deeper than it just being a simple trend. The essay went viral and it was republished across 6 international editions of Vogue, and it got people thinking, myself included. The essay definitely tapped into something that people have been feeling, but they haven't quite put into words like she did.
Is having a boyfriend embarrassing now? And even without reading the article, my immediate answer was yes.
The reason why having a boyfriend is embarrassing is because y'all came on social media and showed us that it was. If everyone would have kept their low standards to themselves and didn't show us the things they were enduring at home just so they can have a man in their life, people wouldn't think it was embarrassing. But not these videos of your boyfriends and your husbands packing you dog lunches, preparing food for you that I wouldn't even feed my mom's dog. Of course that shit is embarrassing because y'all keep getting online and showing us how embarrassing it is.
So to understand how we got here, we have to look back and trace how women's relationships to partnerships have evolved and how quickly those expectations have started to shift in just a few generations. What's up YouTube, I'm tinysey, and if you're new here, welcome to the channel. Feel free to hang out, check out my old videos, and if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to my digital garden. Everyone seems to be chasing a certain image, and that's even in love. But honestly, the only routine I care about perfecting at the moment is my skincare routine. And that's where the FAQ 202 by today's sponsor, Foreo, comes in. They're currently running an amazing Black Friday sale, so keep watching to hear about my additional discount code. I've been using the Foreo products for a few months now, and the FAQ 202 is their next generation LED face mask. It's an ultra lightweight wireless silicone mask that uses 8 different wavelengths, including NIR, to target different skin concerns like dullness and fine lines. And I usually start each treatment by applying the FAQ red light peptide serum, which amplifies and accelerates the LED therapy. I also love using the red and green lights. They've been helping me strengthen my skin and even out my tone. I tend to get a lot of post-acne dark marks, and it really helps with that healing process. So my skin feels so much more smoother, softer, and overall just healthier. This mask is definitely an investment, but it really makes a difference, and since it targets so many skin concerns, it also makes an amazing gift with the holiday season coming up. And since it's Black Friday season, now's the perfect time to get it. Foreo has some incredible deals right now, and if you use my code 35tinysey, you'll get an extra 35% off almost all Foreo products, even the ones already on sale, so that's up to 50% off. So if you've been wanting to level up your skincare routine or get ahead on your holiday gifting, check out my link in my description to grab the best Foreo deals of the year while they last. And thank you to our sponsor, Foreo. So let's quickly go back in time to get some context. Not that long ago, having a man wasn't just socially desirable, it was pretty much a woman's survival strategy. Women needed husbands to open bank accounts, sign leases, or even be taken seriously in professional spaces. Marriage wasn't even really about love, it was about access, and the legal and economic realities meant that being single was risky behavior. A woman's security, status, and ability to participate in society often depended on her relationship to a man. So first it's her father and then her husband. But as we know, that dependence didn't last forever. Over time, women gained financial independence, education, and legal rights that previous generations were fighting for. So now women had a choice, and that completely reframed what a relationship even meant to them. Then we fast forward a little bit, and now we're in the girl boss era of the 2010s. And this era was all about the idea of women being able to have it all. And this idea was pushed heavily looking back. Fifth Harmony had this song, Michelle Obama, and that's probably the theme song of the girl boss era. It was definitely a vibe in the moment, but looking back, it was a little bit off. So the girl boss dream kind of crashed, and the pressure to be everything, a career woman, a perfect partner, and the self-care goddess, it just wasn't sustainable, and a lot of people were burnt out. Some of you guys may have heard of her, but Matilda Durf was seen as the modern face of that whole aesthetic. And when she was exposed as a problematic employer in 2024, that was kind of the nail in the coffin for that whole era. So now we're here in the present 2025, and I think there is another cultural shift that's happening. Suddenly, the internet has become obsessed with the trad wife ideal, which is short for a traditional wife. You could think of it as that 1950s nostalgia where women are wearing prairie dresses. Now we call it cottagecore. They're baking sourdough. They're taking care of the kids. They're submitting to their husbands. All that great stuff. Influencers like Hannah Nealman, people know her as Ballerina Farm, and Nara Smith have really turned this version of domesticity into content, and millions of people are definitely hooked. For a lot of women, the appeal isn't about the politics or that it's conservative leaning. It's about the peace that this life offers. After years of the girl boss hustle culture being pushed, a lot of women are just worn out from doing it all and just trying to do it all, because I don't think a lot of people were successful. So then you get this image of someone baking or gardening and it feels like a dream, or at least it feels like a vacation. But there's probably so many different reasons this has become popular. It could be about the submission, it could be about being able to rest, or it could be something else entirely. There's no one answer, and there's just so many overlapping reasons that this could be growing in popularity. But what is clear is that it is speaking to something that some women are wanting. We also need to talk about the so-called gender wars. You can't really talk about modern relationships without noticing that there's a growing divide between men and women, especially younger generations like Gen Z. Recent research from 2024 shows that over the past decade, young women have moved further to the political left, while young men have started leaning more to the right. And women ages 18 to 29 are about 15% more likely to call themselves very liberal in comparison to men. This gap's been growing since the late 90s, and more than half of men under 30 supported Donald Trump in the 2024 election. But this gender wars is more than about who somebody voted for. It's pointing to the totally different ways that each gender is seeing the world. One study found that 61% of Democrats think women face a lot of discrimination, while only 19% of Republicans agree with that statement. So there's also just a divide between these two belief systems. As one researcher put it, it's not that men and women are from different planets anymore, it's that Republicans and Democrats are. And we are noticing that Democrats and Republicans are straying further and further apart in ideology, but that's a whole different conversation. Anyways, we see this ideological gap also showing up in dating, and young women, especially after movements like Me Too and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, are a lot more cautious about who they date and what values their partners are holding. I remember after Donald Trump was elected in 2024, we started to see a lot of videos where people were like, oh, my boyfriend voted for Trump, and they actually were breaking up over these things. A lot of women understandably don't want to be with someone that doesn't even respect them and their autonomy. And on social media especially, we're seeing that this tension is only becoming worse. On social media, men are often lumped into one big group, and you can see that a lot of women believe that men all think the same way and have the same bad intentions. This shows up online as those comments where it's like, don't make me agree with a man, or like, why would a man be there? Basically, it's a kind of running joke that's turned into bad PR for men in general. And while a lot of it is coming from their real frustrations and their lived experiences, that sort of content is feeding the divide that's been growing between men and women. From what I see, everyone is reacting to caricatures of each other instead of the real people behind the screens, which makes it a lot harder for the people to genuinely try to connect with each other. But then again, it doesn't even seem like connection is the goal for now. Writer Faith Hill said in The Atlantic, for a lot of women right now, it just doesn't feel like a time when they trust or feel respected by men. And that's not just a feeling, because it's starting to shape behavior. After Trump's 2024 re-election, interest surged in the 4B movement, which started in South Korea, and it's encouraging women to completely opt out of heterosexual relationships as a protest against misogyny. And it's a pretty extreme example, but it is showing how politics and personal relationships are becoming a one. Dating's honestly been rough for the past years. There's the burnout, the trust issues, and everyone's expectations shifting very fast. But now being online is adding a whole different kind of pressure that wasn't there before. People used to post their partners without a lot of thought, especially in the early days, but now it's not really the same because it feels a lot heavier. It's not really fun. It feels risky because you're putting your information out into the public. And when you do that, now people's opinions are there, people's expectations expectations are there that you never really even asked for, and your business is just out there. You'll see that some people post these very highly curated social media perfect versions of their relationship, and if it fits into those unspoken aesthetic rules for social media, they end up getting praised for it. But on the flip side, I noticed if someone shares something that's more raw or realistic and unfiltered, people usually have more negative things to say about them.
Someone tagged me in this, how my boyfriend and I split the bills, rent 0, 100, he's paying for everything, by the way. And the same person tagged me in this post, how my boyfriend and I split the bills, rent 50-50, duh, they have a very equitable relationship. And as you can imagine, certain people are mad about this and not mad about this. However, I want to see if we can notice a trend here. 100-0, provider-man dynamic, 50-50 proportional relationship. Please tell me that you know what I'm getting at here. But now let's look at the comments of the people in the 50-50 relationship. Someone said roommate activities, which I literally never understood because anyone who's living with someone else is roommates with that person. And then this person says, what is she getting out of this? Please tell me. A man's job is to provide. What do you mean, what's she getting out of this? She's in a happy relationship. She doesn't need anything other than him.
And honestly, I don't think there even is a right way to post your partner, but from the early days of social media, there's definitely a lot more overthinking than we ever had before. In the infamous Vogue article, Shantae Joseph pointed out a very interesting trend. More and more women are soft launching their partners. So this looks like posting a hand on a steering wheel, or the back of someone's head at a museum, or even just having 2 glasses on a table. And it's a way of signaling that you are in a romantic relationship without fully confirming it. And it feels like this has been going on for years, like maybe 5-6 years at this point. It's subtle enough that people won't openly comment on it, or at least they won't do it to your face. Some people don't want to openly show their happiness. It's a kind of superstition. They fear things like evil eye. I think other people just find it practical because if things end, it's a lot easier to delete a lot of vague photos instead of wiping a whole highlight reel of your ex. Because relationships already feel so political and difficult to find, the fear of public embarrassment is becoming a real fear, and the internet isn't really a safe place to be vulnerable anymore. People definitely treat other people's lives like it's entertainment, and you just become gossip for old classmates or strangers online who don't even really care about you. We see this happening to influencers all the time, and even people that aren't influencers, like the couch girl incident, where she was just a regular girl and became the topic of discussion for months on end. I see it all the time, and strangers who will know literally nothing about the relationship will confidently decide that your relationship is toxic based on whatever you posted. It definitely depends on what platform you're on, but certain people feel entitled to weigh in or point out red flags, to tell you to break up, or they just make assumptions about who your partner is. One woman told Vogue she'd been in a 12-year relationship and she had never posted her partner even once. And when it ended, she said she felt relieved. She said, even though I'm a romantic, men will still embarrass you even 12 years in. So claiming them just feels lame. Now, that's definitely an extreme case. Most people aren't hiding a relationship for over a decade, but the idea of keeping things private for as long as possible is becoming a lot more normal. I've even heard people say things like, don't hard launch until you're married. And I think it's funny because you can still end up getting divorced, but it just shows how far people will go to protect themselves from that embarrassment, or at least delay it for as long as they can. And that mindset just says a lot about where we are right now. Love feels like a high-risk PR decision, and it makes sense that showing your boyfriend online feels embarrassing. We're terrified of looking foolish in public, and you won't get sympathy anymore. Now it's just your first mistake was trusting a man. Now, should people be more mindful of what they share online? I'll be the first one to say yes. But with this being the current environment, it makes sense that having a boyfriend feels risky to show online. People are scared of being judged or being wrong about somebody that they picked, or even just becoming that next person the internet mocks for trusting the wrong partner. So they end up hiding it, or they soft launch it, or they just avoid posting altogether. Social media is just not used the same as it originally was intended. I mean, you used to be just following people that you knew, and now we have influencers. Now we are following strangers. We become friends with strangers. So posting about your relationship is no longer to your immediate circle. It's to a bunch of strangers that you don't know, and you don't know how they'll react. Which brings us to another phenomenon, the extreme standards that we're starting to see online. And this is starting to dictate what makes a relationship feel acceptable to even post, or even worth having at all. I think there's a loud subset of women that are shifting the tone around how women actually feel about men. And when you scroll through relationship content online, it's definitely a lot. It seems like relationships only get celebrated when the man is contributing to the nth degree. They better be paying all the bills, planning elaborate dates, buying gifts. Basically, they have to be proving nonstop that he's worthy. And of course, it's easy to see why that sort of relationship would be celebrated and why they're getting the "what prayer did you say" comment. But the problem is that if someone posts anything less than that, the comment section is very sarcastic. There's a lot of backhanded compliments. They can't be happy for anyone that doesn't have that version of a relationship that everyone is starting to uphold nowadays. It's very much that Shira 7 mindset, and she's a dating coach whose content focuses on what she calls high value dating. She's encouraging women to date strategically, choose partners who invest in them, and avoid doing unpaid emotional or financial labor. She frames it as value awareness and self-preservation, and her rise happened right alongside soft girl, trad wife, and stay-at-home girlfriend aesthetics. So like we discussed, after years of being told to be independent and to carry everything on your shoulders or by yourself, a lot of people swung very hard into that opposite direction. So instead of the middle ground, we've landed in another polarized space. And to be clear, this isn't all women. A lot of women are in relationships. They're happily posting their partners. They're soft launching, hard launching, not posting at all. But again, there is that very loud subset of women online. And I think that's the group that's resonating the most with Shantae Joseph's Vogue question: is having a boyfriend embarrassing now? These are the women with their guards up and whose past experiences make the idea of being publicly wrong about a man feel humiliating. And for them, the stakes feel a lot higher. The embarrassment feels even larger, and the judgment of choosing wrong, so to speak, is a lot more heavier for them. And of course, this group of women didn't come out of nowhere. Women have spent generations carrying a lot of the emotional labor, the domestic work, and the mental load in relationships while also being told to be grateful for what they had. So there's been decades of dismissal and gaslighting and discrimination and this pressure about how they look. They have to be pretty. They have to act ladylike. Women have given far more than they've received, and so they're just tired. So when we see some women refuse to accept the poor treatment, or they have high standards, or they speak up and demand respect, and they refuse to settle, that comes from somewhere that's very real. And some women would rather just be alone than to risk being mistreated. That's just what feels safe to them. And some women do just have really high standards, really high bars, because that's what feels safe with them. And that's okay. And when so many women do share these similar experiences, the line between "it's this specific man that hurt me" and "this group of men caused harm," it starts to become very blurry, and you don't know if it's the individual or the collective.
When women say "I hate all men," I don't ever correct her, because there has to be a reason that you feel that way. And who am I to tell you that you're not allowed to? I'm not. And when men say like, "What about me? Are you an awful man?" Then don't feel hit. If I wasn't aiming for you, don't feel hit. You know what I mean? They are always asking the wrong questions. Instead of saying, "Why does it have to be all men?" Why aren't you asking, "Why do women hate all men?" Like, whose fault is that? Is that mine? Or is it the cause of a man? And part of intersectional feminism is autonomy. The freedom to do and choose how you walk and move in this world is solely up to you and nobody else. So if you want to hate all of them until you find a good one, by all means. That's what I did. And it worked.
Some women need that distance right now, and they're choosing to be more cautious, and they're choosing to only date a man if he can meet their standards, or they're choosing themselves. This is exactly the demographic who feels the Vogue headline to their core. They don't look at a boyfriend as a flex. They look at it as a potential liability in the court of public opinion. But again, this isn't every woman's experience, and there's still plenty of women that are navigating relationships with nuance, and they're trying to hold high standards without expecting perfection, or trying to understand that flaws don't automatically equal disrespect. So although they seem like the loudest voices online, I don't think they represent all women. The internet has a thing with amplifying very polarizing voices or things that sound controversial. So when you go into real life, things are just never as extreme as they seem. So we're seeing this protective instinct turn into a popular public rhetoric, and there are women saying, "Prove you're different before I let my guard down." And maybe eventually we will land somewhere else, but I think that's just where we are right now. And most women don't want to go back to accepting less. Ideally, we'll find a place where standards can be high without being impossible. But right now, for the subset of women who see having a boyfriend as potentially embarrassing, we're in that impossibly high bar era. So we've kind of been answering it here and there, but is having a boyfriend actually embarrassing? Shantae Joseph's answer was a lot more nuanced than the headline might suggest. I don't think she was saying that being in a relationship is cringe. She was questioning whether the old heterosexual romantic fantasy still holds the same power that it used to, and whether women still feel the need to anchor their worth to having a man. And we clearly see that that's not really the sentiment anymore, although there is still a subset of women that are trying to revitalize that thinking. Shantae points out that heterosexuality isn't just a personal preference, it's a political institution. And historically, as she argues, that institution hasn't exactly benefited women. And then when you add today's ideological split with men moving to the right and women moving to the left, it makes a lot of sense that women don't want to compromise their values or their beliefs or politics just to be partnered with a man. And honestly, I think that's very fair. So the real question isn't, are boyfriends embarrassing? It's, what does it mean to be in a heterosexual relationship in 2025 when gender politics feel so much more tense and divided than they ever have been before? And that's the million-dollar question people have been trying to answer for the past few years. And for some women, like we discussed, they have their guard up and they're leaning towards rejection. That's why movements like 4B are gaining traction, and that's why singlehood is celebrated as liberation nowadays. And that's also why some people see having a boyfriend as not a flex, but a vulnerability. But there are also women on the other side of the spectrum, like I said, with the trad wives and the stay-at-home girlfriends. And then there's that huge middle group who just want something that's healthy and emotionally safe. The stigma that's around being single has definitely dropped dramatically, and women have been financially independent and fulfilled and complete without a partner for quite some time now. So that whole old idea that you're only half a person until you're coupled is finally dying. But a lot of women do still want relationships. They just want very specific ones. Like we discussed, most women won't settle for what their parents settled for. Modern women want an equal partnership. They want to share the load. And you can see that they do still want relationships, but they just want it with someone that actually is aligning with their values and respects them and doesn't add more emotional labor to their plate. Of course, I still think there's this general suspicion towards men emotionally, politically, and in terms of trust. And a lot of women have very low expectations that men will rise to the occasion. But that doesn't stop women from trying. Their expectations are lower because of the past experiences, so they're just less surprised when a man messes up. I kind of feel bad for men that are trying or aren't part of the problem, and sometimes even that feels risky to say, but I also understand that that's just what happens when the PR for your gender isn't at the best. Everything is just sorting itself out right now, and women are divided in what they want. Men seem to be divided amongst themselves as well. And then you have men and women who are also not agreeing. So we haven't landed at that new normal just yet, and we're in this transitional era. So to answer the question, are boyfriends actually embarrassing? I would say no. Boyfriends aren't inherently embarrassing, but in this climate with these pressures and in the particular corners of the internet where this conversation lives, it absolutely makes sense that it can feel that way. So we can see we're in a moment defined by a lot of extremes. On one end, we have the conservative values, trad wife aesthetics, and the soft girl living. And on the other end, we have women that are rejecting relationships with men entirely. They're viewing heterosexual partnership as incompatible with their values and approaching men with a level of suspicion that sometimes can border on hostility. And in between those two poles is sitting the vast, overwhelmed middle. The algorithm just fuels us with more of what we watch, whether we actually liked it or not. And so women are seeing endless content about male narcissism and weaponized incompetence. And then men are seeing manosphere videos about how feminism has gone wrong and gone too far. It's creating a lot of silos and these ideological islands where each gender is being socialized into the opposing worldviews. Relationship fears are only getting reinforced and stereotypes are becoming so much more common, and we're less empathetic for each other. So we aren't just disagreeing, we're literally being taught to view each other as risks. And with all that context, that is the world that the vote question was dropped into. The extremes are so much louder and the middle ground feels like it's shrinking and disappearing. And what gets lost in all of these extremes is the possibility for that genuine connection. Real relationships aren't aesthetic performances, and they're just not going to be perfectly curated for content or social media. And I don't think they were meant to be. They don't always fit fit into these neat political categories or the trending narratives that we see online. They're very complicated because it's two people with different backgrounds, different beliefs, and baggage that are trying to build something together. We were the generation that grew up with all the endless love stories in Disney, so it's not surprising how romanticized everything's become, but it's just not realistic. Connection requires accepting imperfection in your partner, but also in yourself. So sometimes you will have difficult conversations about the dishes and emotional labor. And I feel like that's what's missing from a lot of the discourse, the acknowledgement that it won't be perfect, because who wants to hear that? Opening yourself up to someone always comes with that risk of being hurt or disappointed or even publicly embarrassed. But that doesn't mean that the whole idea of being in a relationship is something that should be shameful. So having a boyfriend isn't necessarily embarrassing, but as we see, the climate can make it feel embarrassing. If we're asking whether women should be embarrassed about wanting partnership, then I think no. There's nothing shameful about desiring intimacy or choosing to build a life with someone, or even being vulnerable enough to try to do all of that with another person. But if we're asking whether that traditional model of heterosexual relationships that's built on unequal labor and rigid gender roles deserves just a little bit of our suspicion and skepticism, then the answer is definitely yes. I think women are doing the right thing when they demand more and they refuse to accept these relationships that diminish them. And I think a woman should question a relationship if it's causing her to compromise on her values or constantly be emotionally exhausted all the time. And if we're asking whether it's currently popular culturally to be happily in a relationship, I would say it seems like no, not really. I don't know, it's very vague. It seems unknown, and the vibe is definitely shifting. Being single has become a lot more acceptable, and sometimes it's even aspirational. But at the end of the day, people do still want connection, and people aren't opposed to relationships. They just don't want the bad ones. And whatever people decide to do in the end of the day, I think it's okay. What I don't like is all the negativity and judgment that we see around relationships. I can't say that I'm not guilty of sometimes partaking, but I do think we should strive to be less judgmental and negative and allow people to do what they want to do, even if we don't necessarily agree with it. You see that some people are acting as though there's only one right way to navigate a relationship, and there just isn't, because everyone is so different. We all have our own preferences, but we should be mindful about how we project them onto others. The conversation Vogue started is definitely valuable, but only if we move past that provocative headline into those deeper questions. And those questions don't even have easy answers. Relationships have always been complicated. And just because we find ourselves talking about these issues publicly doesn't mean previous generations had it figured out. They just didn't have social media to talk about the messes that they were also in, but they were writing books about it. Anyways, eventually we'll figure it all out because people do still want connection. But that's all I have for you. What do you guys think about this whole topic that Vogue is bringing up? Is having a boyfriend embarrassing? If you made it this far in the video, please comment the heart emoji. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next YouTube video.